Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of our Sustainable Packaging Machinery series. In this series, we'll provide insight into the OEM perspective on corporate sustainability initiatives. We'll also share recommendations for the best ways brand owners can engage with OEMs to achieve their sustainability goals sooner and with a greater chance of long-term success. I'm Taz Lombardo, the host of this series, and with me today is Michelle Bryson, Global Sustainable Packaging Leader for BW Packaging. In her role with BW Packaging, Michelle collaborates with brand owners, packaging suppliers, and industry associations to develop sustainable packaging strategies that drive toward cleaner manufacturing. Michelle brings 30 plus years of packaging development experience to BW, and prior to joining us, Michelle worked for brand owners including PepsiCo and Wells Enterprises to develop and support the development of packaging innovation and sustainability roadmaps. So Michelle, welcome to our Sustainable Packaging Machinery series, episode 1, very exciting.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Taz. I'm really excited. I think this is a great opportunity for us to really kind of raise the awareness in some things or topics that some of our customers might have heard about from different sources and really give us an opportunity to speak from our perspective on some of those thoughts.
Definitely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm really excited to jump in here. And to peel back the curtain a little bit, I guess, Michelle, you and I have known each other for a little over a year now.
Right?
And one thing that I know about you is that sustainability is not just your job, it's something that you really care about. One of the things that I've heard you say several times since knowing you is the importance of including your OEM in the conversation early when it comes to sustainability. So I guess just before we even jump into the interview, could you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the early things that I had learned in my career as a brand owner is that anytime you're going to bring a new material into the operations facility, the line time is so very precious. And especially now, as we had exited a couple of very difficult years coming out of COVID seasons, that there was some labor shortages and what have you. And I think the idea around how can OEMs and material suppliers and brand owners really collaborate early on in that process so that we can increase the likelihood of early on success. And so for me, that was something that was very critical in my work experience, is what was always to bring it in my OEM, the applications engineers, and really work with them. And anytime I could work with the OEM outside of my facility ahead of time, that gave me an early read on when something might be particularly tricky, or we might get some indications of what those settings might be before we actually got to the manufacturing floor. So that's definitely something I see, and I see that there's some brand owners out there that might not be engaging their OEMs as early as they could be.
I think that's something really valuable that you bring to the table, Michelle, is that kind of dual perspective of the CPG having done that for a long time, and now you're over on the OEM side. So it's great to be able to have that dual perspective, I think.
Thanks, Taz. It actually makes it a lot of fun.
Well, let's dive into the interview. I think let's just kind of get things kicked off by introducing the PMMI 2022 Challenges and Opportunities Report. And so that's really what we want to dig into today. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this report, the 2022 Challenges and Opportunities Report is the result of conversations that PMMI moderated at Pack Expo, and they're calling these sessions the Vision 2030 sessions. And what these really included were voices ranging from CPGs to material suppliers and OEMs and other parties, really to get into discussion about 4 primary themes, 3 of which we won't get into today. But the one that we are focusing on today is sustainability. So I guess let's start here. The report characterizes sustainability as, quote, a growing trend with consumers and companies looking at new ways to reduce their carbon footprints. First of all, do you agree with this characterization? Is it accurate to describe the demand that we're seeing for sustainable solutions as a trend?
Yeah, that's a great question, or great topic to bring up. When I first arrived, I think trend was a very common phrase that people are using, but as you start to really understand what's going on in sustainability and what it takes for an organization to lead in sustainability and thrive in sustainability, you've got to understand that it's not really a trend. It's really talking about incorporating sustainability practices or sustainable practices into their business culture. And so I would challenge that thought that it's a trend and really to say that in order to be successful, to do this well, to do the right things for the organization, to make sure that the organization is still profitable during this process, is that they have to think about sustainability in terms of, how do we kind of shift our thinking? How do we bring sustainability into the fabric of the boardroom and to the, facility in terms of operations, as we bring up new buildings, as we, think about materials and we really think about the end of life of those things. It's not something that's really a trend. It's really going to be embracing a new way of doing business.
It's a shift. It's not something that's a flash in
Hmm.
the pan like some of these other trends that we've seen.
Yeah, that's right. And I think as companies are starting to look at the new Paris Climate Agreement goals, it's going to be a little bit more, it's even going to get a little bit more aggressive in the next few years. So, a trend to me feels like it's here and it's gone. And this to me is something that's it's going to be here for a long time.
CPGs are clearly interested in more recyclable and low carbon options when it comes to packaging solutions. That's clear through this report. However, the sentiment that you read here is that there's certain concerns that the industry at large needs to address. And these include understanding policy. You just mentioned the Paris Climate Agreement, sharing information, and providing testing and support of new materials. So, we speak from the OEM perspective. That's who we are at BW Packaging. Michelle, kind of what do you see as the role of OEMs in this space?
Yeah, I think the three things that are highlighted here, all of them are really important for us as an OEM and a partner to our customers, is that we do need to understand policy because understanding policy helps us to ensure that we're connecting with material suppliers on the latest and greatest materials that are coming forward. Um, and I think, a lot of our flexible teams have really been on point with that. They've really been saying, hey, let's say in Europe, they might have a different percentage of acceptable flexible resin in a paper solution, where in the United States it might be different. So it's important for us to say, yeah, we are leading in this space. Our customers should feel confident in that, although ultimately it's their call as to what materials that they do bring forward. But knowing that we've done some of that testing and that they can feel confident that they can come in, they can do testing with us, and that we would be, helping them to understand. Some of our customers don't always have a big R&D department. So for our major brand owners, they will, but for our smaller organizations, they do rely on the fact that we've done some of that background work and that they can kind of lean into the fact that we've already done some preliminary assessments. And then so sharing that information is truly important. And then really, again, around, the testing piece, I think some of our material suppliers will want to come in and as they're working on formulations, each one of them are going to come at formulating sustainable materials in a slightly different way. That's part of their competitive advantage. So you don't have one-stop shopping on a material solution. So it really is important for us to be able to support our material partners and say, hey, we might have an insight on what's important to run on our film, like what's the right coefficient of friction on a particular material, or if we're looking at lightweighted cans, or if we're looking at compostable packaging, what do we know that we can share without giving away anything that's a trade secret, of course, or without giving anything that's confidential. But if we do understand something that's important for our machine, like say it's porosity of a compostable material and that we might have to change the positions of some of our suction cups as a result of that. So I think our customers would hope that we would be well versed in many of these areas, and that, we would share that insight as much as we are able to.
What you're saying, it sounds like it would be very hard for the OEM to kind of come in afterwards and say, hey, we know that you want to run the sustainable material. We understand your goals, but it may be a longer journey to that success that you're talking about. And that's something I've heard you say before too, is increasing the likelihood of early success. And so, I mean, what stage should the OEM be brought in at to really optimize that early success opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, as a brand owner, the earlier you can bring an OEM into that journey, the better. And I'll say this, that a lot of times they don't think about the OEM until a little much later. They're working with their material suppliers, and the material suppliers might be running down a pathway, and they might have completely missed a critical element of the design construct because they hadn't engaged us. And so I think, even in that PMMI report, you do see that some brand owners do recognize the importance of bringing material suppliers, OEMs, and the brand owners together as early as possible. And I would echo that sentiment. There's no harm in bringing us in early. And I think there's great benefit to doing that, because the more that we can share in that learning journey, and get materials on our equipment as quick as possible, the more the likelihood that the brand owners can hit the mark of what they're looking for innovation launches. Some of these material solutions might require an engineered equipment solution. Some of them might just be a setting adjustment. But for an engineered solution, an equipment engineered solution, it can take 6 months to 2 years. So as we had learned with our flexible team, the engineered solutions for paper took us roughly, 6 months to do that for an alternate forming collar. And for Centerlink, for their their solution that was for the snap cut for the dairy product, to run a sustainable solution, that took 2 years of development time. So it really, really is important, if a brand owner has a particular time in mind that they want to hit for their launch, they engage us so that we can work with them and maybe help position a little bit more carefully the time that they might be able to launch their innovation or their sustainable solution.
That makes a ton of sense. And actually it's a good lead in for the next question here. So these responses in the PMMI report, they're grouped by basically major concerns or barriers to the adoption of sustainable packaging solutions by CPGs. The first one they list here is the perceived barrier of not being able to run sustainable materials on older equipment. The example that you just gave a minute ago, Michelle, is there's obviously a huge difference when it comes to the lead time for implementing a solution. The capital investment is vastly different between maybe an upgrade or a retrofit versus a completely new solution. So my first question for you is it true that these brand owners need to buy new equipment to run sustainable materials, or is it possible to run sustainable materials on older equipment?
Yeah, that when I saw that quote, I really feel badly that some brand owners are feeling that they're in that position, because I would say they aren't. Uh, that to me, maybe just as somebody that might not have gotten their OEM involved, and saying, hey, what can we do? What can we do to run these solutions? And just, a couple of weeks ago, I was at one of our facilities where we had, the brand owner, the material supplier, and the ultimate retailer involved. And, just really had a whole group of us together and looking at older equipment that can be modified. And we had the applications engineer there right at that moment. And we were looking at 3 different sustainable solutions. And in that situation, you could see the difference in some of the different materials. So, if something was a little heavier gauge, it might take a little bit longer of an open or a dwell time. But in this situation, we are able to make those adjustments. So I would absolutely say that is not a hard and fast rule. And I would encourage everyone to really get their OEMs in and quickly, kind of assess what the materials are. It might be that the material in particular that you might have tried to run in the beginning might not be the best formulation, and you might have to be open to looking at alternatives. But I do think that since equipment can be such a major expense, it's worth bringing in the OEM early on to say what opportunities you might have.
It sounds like it's all about having the right perspectives in the room because the example you gave before, you might not even know what the right questions are to ask. And so, of
Yeah.
course, you may think it's not possible, but unless you have the right perspectives in the room to tell you what is and isn't possible, you're just kind of basing your decisions on assumptions, it sounds like.
Yeah, so far, and again, as you know, I've only been here about a year, but I've seen some excellent support teams, deploying resources to customers. I've seen a lot of different materials coming into our facilities. So we are not officially an R&D testing facility at all of our locations. A couple of them we have that. But, depending on what machines might be coming through, we have the opportunity to test quite a bit, quite a different array of materials, and using a lot of our different machine styles. And if it's not available in the US, it might be available in the UK. So I would encourage, you know, brand owners to really just engage their OEMs and especially us early on in that process. Get those perspectives in the room.
So another concern that brand owners shared in these sessions was that to adopt sustainable packaging, they would have to sacrifice to some extent on production and performance. So my question for you, Michelle, is in general, do these CPGs need to concede to losses in production and performance? Or is this, again, one of those times when collaborating with an OEM early could enable a more favorable outcome for them?
Yeah, Taz, I think that's right on. If you don't engage your OEM early, it's very likely that these things could happen. However, I would say it's, and each material that was explained here, there's different heat curves that are associated with the different films. So you will likely see some differences in dwell time and performance. However, the films are evolving constantly, and what's being considered sustainable is also evolving as material suppliers are getting in front of the different APR boards and getting their materials qualified. So I would suggest it's possible that the material solution that might be causing a problem, there might be a different material solution to look at. But I would also say that, when you're looking at establishing the right dwell time and the right heat settings, it can be a combination of factors. And, it's very possible that they're seeing something that, early on the days of looking at different shrink sleeves when we were in a PVC shrink sleeve and we were bringing on PET G shrink sleeves. I think there was a lot of consternation at that time as well, which then PET G became the standard. Now, as we're looking at floatable films or crystallizable films more commonly in the US, sometimes as the films start to come up and operators are, a little bit more challenged with what's the right, settings, what's the right speeds, all those things take a little time, as well as once you have an established setting, you have to ensure that from operator one to operator two, from day shift to night shift to midnight shift, that all the operators are well trained in terms of what the new settings are. And what I had found is it's often really important to put right at the station, whether it's the labeler or the steam tunnel or the heat tunnel, whatever application you're looking at, that the new settings are clearly made obvious, or as you shift from one customer to another customer, for instance, if you're a co-packer or a co-man, that those changes are readily apparent, and so that it gives you also an increased likelihood of success. If you're a major brand owner that's pumping out the same material time and time again, it's going to just be a little bit more time where you can kind of get those settings set up, where if you've got a lightweight can, that you've got the right top load on the machine so that it's not going to be causing those lightning bolts in the body. So I do think sometimes it just takes a little time, but bring your brand, have the brand owners bringing in the OEMs to make sure that you've got those settings set up properly is truly critical. Make sure that you give everybody, all the operators, the opportunity to be successful. And then just having, some reviews as a team, in terms of what worked well from shift to shift. And if at the end of the day, the material that you're looking at might not be as favorable, it might be a case that you have to, continue to press your material suppliers on what's the best formulation that they've been able to come up with. And if we come together and ideate, you're always going to look at a better solution when three main mindsets come together as opposed to just one or two.
It's really interesting that you bring up the operators too. I mean, that's another, hopefully we can call that a trend, is the labor shortages issue, and the turnover that you're seeing among operators. I mean, making operator training and onboarding easy is crucial to not just sustainability, but anything that we do, from an OEM perspective. So, I mean, again, if we keep on coming back to perspectives, I think the operator perspective wasn't one that I had even considered, but I mean, you're right. If you've got a co-packer who's running different types of materials, sustainable or not, that's something you should be engaging with your OEM in as well. What sort of training tools and what sort of onboarding and what sort of support are you offering to me? Because I've got an operator today who may not be here next week or next month, and I don't want to be starting from square one again.
Yeah, 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 for sure. We saw a lot of that happening in the, 21, and even into 22. And I think, some of it has turned the corner, but you could probably put five brand owners and co-mans on the line, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not past it yet." So I think the opportunity that we've recognized is that, in our innovations, our digital innovations platform team is doing some work on this, and they're taking it. That might be another podcast for us, Taz, but bringing in Joe and his team and really saying, what are we doing in that space to make it easy for new operators to learn quickly, by using, easy to use operator interface. I think that's important. And even capturing those settings as you're running this material, what's the settings for this line, this station on the line. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities our digital innovations team is bringing forward. And that's another thing that, we want to hear from brand owners on, what is it that you need us to measure? What is it that would make your life easier? Those things, the more that we hear about that, the more we can build those into the innovation pipeline.
All right. I know that time is kind of winding down here. I just got the Zoom notification saying you only have 10 minutes left. So I've got one more question for you, Michelle. So there's a chart on page 6 of this report that shows that 52% of those who were interviewed feel that packaging machinery is limiting the implementation of sustainable initiatives. So what are your thoughts on this? Should OEMs be doing more to support customers?
Yeah, and I did have to take another look at that chart. And gosh, to me, it's really unfortunate that some of our brand owners out there are feeling that way. And I think several of the responses that we've had in some of your earlier questions really kind of drive home the message that the equipment shouldn't be the limiting factor. It's a three. This is a system, is the number one thing to think about. To get to market, you need a product, you need a material to hold it in, something to hold it in to get to the consumer, and you need a machine to put it all together. Those three things can't be done well unless the system comes together and really, has an opportunity to build the best solution. So I don't believe that the equipment is limiting. I believe that it's most important to bring your OEM in early so that when you are bringing your sustainable material to the line, that the first time you're doing it is not going to be the day that you need product to be in that package and getting it out the door. That's the probably the third, fourth, or fifth time that we should be engaging. It's that we've had an opportunity to have early on conversations in an ideation session, that we've had an opportunity to look at the material and bring it into our equipment and actually, test it in our facility, that we've had some other kind of module type assessment of things. That's what we really need to be thinking about, is that the first time that material is on our machines should not be the day that you are, counting on that product to be out the door. So, if we can say, hey, bring us in early and often, that's the best message I could share with everyone, because I think sustainability is here to stay. How we do it, uh, the best way to do this and bring it to market quickly is going to be, let's have us all come together and ideate on the right way to bring sustainable solutions to market. And that's really what's going to make a difference in the end.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to end on. What is the phrase? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, we have to lean on each other to really make this work. And I think that's the other thing I really noticed as I've been working in sustainability. We all want to succeed at the end. I mean, there might be competition, sure, because that's healthy. But at the end of the day, it's in everyone's best interest to have sustainability win.
Well, I can't wait for the next episode. Thanks so much for your time today, Michelle, and insights. And so just to plug kind of what's coming up in our next episode. So we will continue to dig into the PMMI report. Today, we talked a little bit about the why it's so important to include your OEM early. And next time, specifically, we're going to get into the best ways that brand owners and material suppliers can engage with OEMs to progress their sustainable packaging initiatives together. So if you found this content useful, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. If you'd like to share this content with a peer or friend, but maybe they don't want to listen to or watch a long video, we've also summarized today's conversation in a blog post, which you can also find in the show notes below. So thanks again for everyone out there listening, and look forward to episode 2. Have a nice week.